Delighted to welcome the Environment Secretary, George Eustice, to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, we've got you on audio, not on video. I've been watching you standing out in the snow I know we have got you on video now. I'm delighted you're no longer standing in the freezing cold, very much feeling the environment rather than just talking about it.
Yes, your competitors at Sky have got a new COVID policy, so I had to go outside in the snow.
Well, good on you there. Let's talk about a new, the app users across England and Wales who've been advised to isolate by the NHS COVID-19 app following close contact with someone. It's now been revealed that we're looking at 1.7 million people have so far, using that app, been advised to isolate. Are you arguing that test and trace app has actually been successful now then?
Yes, I think it's had an important role to play. It's not been the only feature of test and trace, obviously. There's been a lot of manual testing that's gone on as well. But the app, having had a bit of a difficult start, was taken up by a lot of people. I think particularly as we came out of the last lockdown, people were using it when they went to restaurants and pubs to check in, and that was helping people be identified and to self-isolate when they came into contact with somebody who had tested positive.
There have been quite a few issues, though. I know an awful lot of people who decided they'd got the app, thought, yes, this is a good idea, and then stopped using the app because they kept being told to isolate, having not come into contact with someone who had actually had the virus, because they'd been on, say, a different floor, in a different office, someone they'd briefly passed by, and that actually there are some really big issues with it, particularly the fact that it does seem to be unable to read the fact that it might be your neighbour who is on the other side of a wall who has had the COVID positive test, rather than someone you've actually had a risk from getting the virus from.
That's right. It wasn't perfect for all of those reasons. And indeed, there were instances as well where, for instance, people working in the same factory might have left their mobile phones in a locker room, and the phones therefore might have thought they were in contact with somebody because the phones were in contact, but because the phone wasn't on the person, it wasn't an issue. So there were issues like that. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but I think it did help, particularly in terms of people being able to automatically check in to restaurants and bars and to pick up where there was a problem, where they may have been quite close to somebody who had the infection.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the government's policies that's coming into place, we're told, on the 15th of February, which is people coming from a number of 30 plus countries considered to be coronavirus hotspots, or those which have got troubling new variants, whether it's South Africa or the Brazilian variant. And they're going to be facing 10 days of quarantine in a hotel, effectively under security, when they arrive in the country. Why is it that that's being brought in on the 15th of February, and people arriving from those countries right now, okay, they have to have a COVID test before they arrive, and there's mooted possibility they would have to have a COVID test after they arrive, even if they come from a non-sort of red zone country. But why are those people currently being allowed to walk into the country without any checks at all?
Well, when they come into the country, so prior to travelling, they're supposed to have a test, and the carriers are required to check that they have, and they have to test clear before being allowed to travel. Then on arrival, they are supposed to complete a form and hand that in as they come through passport control that basically says where they are going to be in quarantine and gives an address for that. So that should happen. I am aware there's some reports in the papers today that might not have happened in respect of an aircraft that arrived from Doha. I'm sure the Department for Transport will be looking into that, because it's already the case that everybody arriving from anywhere in the world should be into quarantine and should declare where the address is that they're going into quarantine.
But again, should happen, supposed to happen. This is where people get concerned. People's lives and businesses and hopes for the future have all been, education, everything, completely locked down. Now, I'm not in favour of us closing our borders completely. I think this could be done with testing and with a bit more sense. But I travelled back totally legally from a holiday in Antigua at Christmas, and we had to fill out a passenger locator form. I did everything that was legally required. I had a test to get into that country. No test at that time to come back into the UK. But no one even checked our forms. No one checked that we had filled out the form. No one checked what we had actually written on the form. No checks were followed up. Now, this whole supposed to thing, a lot of people whose lives are massively controlled right now, whose businesses have been closed down, whose children are not at school, will be saying, why on earth can't you check the few thousand people coming into the country when you can keep so much control over people who are already here?
Well, indeed, and we have been strengthening that. So since you arrived back from Antigua, we have indeed now required, we did that early in the new year, required pre-travel testing for everybody coming here. A couple of weeks after that, we removed some of the exemptions from quarantine to have a further tightening. And then last week, we decided that there are these high-risk countries who should actually go into quarantine in hotels. We're in the process of procuring that capacity now, and that policy comes in place from next week.
So last week you decided, this has been on the cards for weeks, but last week you decided that this was a risk, this was a danger, and next week you're going to actually have a policy. I mean, really, the idea, are these hotel rooms all full at the moment? No one's allowed to stay in a hotel, are they? They have to be in their own home. We've barely got any travellers. Surely these hotels are all sitting there empty, perfectly capable of taking those people right now. If you think the policy is necessary, why can you not instigate it immediately?
Well, it takes a little bit of time. So we announced the policy last week, and we announced that that policy would start on the 15th of February. And from Thursday, officials in the Department for Health have been in discussion with some of the hotel operators to procure the capacity that we need to bring this into place.
Why did they not start conversations before last Thursday?
Well, because the policy was only decided last week.
Well, it can be decided, but surely you can have a conversation. I might decide on doing building work, but I might have a conversation with the builder at some point before that point.
Well, I think there were some exploratory conversations prior to that, just to understand what capacity is there. But as you said, Julia, at the moment, because there is such a dampener on travel and people can't stay in hotels anyway, there's a lot of surplus capacity in these hotels, particularly around airport locations. So there is the capacity there, and we're working to procure that. So that wait a minute.
So there are thousands upon thousands of empty hotel rooms right now. There are thousands and thousands of staff who are currently on furlough who would love to work. And the government isn't able to get hold of any of those hotel rooms for 2 weeks. Can I just say, don't go into the travel agency business. That's my advice.
Well, it's not 2 weeks. It's a policy that was announced last week, and obviously
it's going to come into force next week. Okay, all right. Let's go back and do some basic maths. A policy announced last week to come into force next week. I've only got a maths O level. But well, that's 2 weeks, isn't it?
It's about 10 days then. It's about 10 days. But it is there are thousands of people here. It is quite a logistical exercise, and you do need to procure those hotels and put in place all the right procedures. Okay. So we decided that it's the appropriate time frame to allow a week or 10 days to stand this up. It's still quite an ambitious thing to do, but we're doing it.
Well, ambitious thing. Other countries have managed to do it for a long time sooner. Let's try some more maths. We spoke to Nicholas Nicola, who owns 2 hairdressers in Leeds. He'd love to open a third one, but of course, difficult to open a third one when you're not even allowed to open the first 2 you've already got. He says that he has he's got £83,000 in debt. He's lost £350,000 in revenues, having been closed for 7 of the last 12 months. He says it's costing him £4,000 a month to keep his 20 staff on furlough in the hope that he can at some point reopen. Let's do some basic maths on that. How long do you think businesses can actually survive paying to keep staff not working while they've got a build-up of deferred rent, deferred VAT, and all those deferred costs of businesses being closed? How long realistically can lockdown continue?
Well, look, realistically, we know that we want to get out of lockdown as soon as possible. And it'll start when the Prime Minister outlines the route map out of this on the 22nd of February. It's too early to say exactly what will happen when. But
why is it too early to say? We've rolled out the vaccine. We've got a magnificent achievement by the government rolling out the vaccine. Really, really, absolutely first rate. Why is it too early to say?
Well, because what we don't want to do, Julia, is to come out of this lockdown prematurely only to find we need to go back into another. And so we decided all along that the right thing to do is to stay in lockdown for now, review things on the 22nd of February. We will then know, and we're on course to deliver our target of vaccinating those top 4 most vulnerable cohorts by the 15th of February. So by next week, over 90% of the over 75s have already been vaccinated, and that's going really well. If we get them vaccinated, and we get the infection rate back down under control, and it is falling, then it starts to give us the ability to loosen these restrictions again as we go into the spring.
You've said we've decided all along. No, we didn't decide all along. Originally, first lockdown, if you remember, last March, it was 3 weeks to flatten the curve. We were told that this lockdown was needed because we had in danger of the NHS being overwhelmed by a huge spike in cases in January, and that that we had the vaccine rolled out. And once the vaccine was rolled out to the over 70s, then we could start loosening it. We have seen a plummeting in the number of cases, in the number of hospital admissions, the number of people in ICU, the number of people who are dying of this coronavirus. We've seen a massive rollout of the vaccine, far beyond what anyone could reasonably have expected in terms of the number of people taking it up. Why, with all of those indices in the right direction, why can we not decide now? Why can we not know what the criteria are now for leaving lockdown?
Well, because the Prime Minister actually has been clear since this particular lockdown that he would review things in February. And the various factors you need to consider are the infection rate, the presence of other strains, the success in rolling out the vaccine.
So all good news.
All of that is good news, yes. So it bodes well that we can start loosening these restrictions. And the Prime Minister is going to set out exactly the course he's going to take in the months ahead on the 22nd of February. So there's not much longer to wait.
No, that's not true. No. 22nd of February is in 2 weeks' time. And the first thing he said he will loosen will be schools, and not before March the 8th. It's a month away. That is a long time to wait. You still on a full-time salary as an MP and a minister. You still in a very, very lovely home. You still actually being allowed out of the house to actually go and do your job. There are millions of people right now who are struggling. They're struggling financially. They're struggling with their mental health, with their physical health. Their children aren't getting a proper education. A month is a lifetime away for those people.
Look, we understand that. And look, we didn't want schools to lock down at all. We resisted that until the last.
Until you didn't.
We didn't want to go into a lockdown at all. But I think, in the event, we've just been through another serious peak where we had deaths running at over 1,000 a day for an extended period. We've got that back under control through implementing the lockdown. And yes, it's very disruptive to people's lives. We would not do it if it weren't necessary. But we have just seen, the difficulties, and the people have just seen the consequences and why we had to do the lockdown, because we've seen that high mortality rate.
OK, but lockdowns are always a political choice. George Eustice, I really appreciate you joining us. I'm glad you were able to talk to us from inside a building, at least. Environment Secretary George Eustice, thank you very much indeed for that.